So with that, I'll let Neil get us going.
Thank you, Anne. Welcome, everyone. As Anne said, we're pretty excited about this one. Every new release gets us pretty excited, but this one's got some really nice things in it that I think are very timely for what's happening in the market, and we think everybody will be pretty interested in seeing what we have in this. So let's just sort of jump in, and I think the way we'll start this is we'll talk about kind of how we look at what pieces of functionality we put into a new product. And there's always a lot of questions about, you know, why don't you have this feature? When are you getting this feature? There's a lot of things going on, and we have to kind of balance all of them out. In the last couple of years, I think you would see that scalability, resiliency, and security are kind of a core piece of every release. On top of that, of course, we like to add some new functionality, and we have both. The increases in these values here, plus some new functionality in this one. And the scalability, resiliency, and security are very important in today's world. Security in particular is something that everyone worries about. So we're going to go through some of the things we've added to help these areas out, and then show you some new functionality we have as well. If you look at how our focus has gone over the last few years, we've been headed in these same directions for a while, as has the market. And part of that is a move to the cloud. And the early cloud was sort of a private cloud, you know, consolidating multiple sites through a private data network. Then there was hybrid cloud, where parts of the infrastructure would be in the cloud, and particularly our application would need to connect to them. And then now it's kind of a mix of hybrid cloud and total cloud. And we'll kind of see in both of those areas what we have to offer. If you look at our history, back in 2009, we really started with an architecture that we knew would let us scale moving forward, and that would let us put the functionality in that we needed. And so we added things like having the ability to connect to Google Gmail. It didn't last too long. It wasn't quite large enough, so we built it up in 2012 or 2011 with some additional capacity. And then in 2012, of course, virtualization was really starting to take hold, so we added support for VMware. And then if you look, we just moved through the years, adding various pieces of functionality that take us to today's release. And today's release has a lot of things in it. One of the things we'll talk about is the ability to tenant a system to deliver secure support to multiple tenants in a partitioned environment. We have a capacity increase, and while that doesn't look like that much of a capacity increase, we'll actually see what's really involved in that. And then the security piece, of course, we're going to talk about as well. So there are two deployment models for CX now. CXE premise, in which all of our components go on premise and typically hook to the premise phone system, and sometimes the premise groupware or email system, sometimes that's in the cloud for a hybrid model. And then we also have our own CXE cloud offering, where you can actually implement CXE hosted in our data center, in the data center we use, that is, and actually pay on a subscription model for that piece of it. So both of those are available. And the cloud piece is also available from a number of our larger dealers who have hosted their own cloud deployments as well. And that is a popular piece for investigation, and we suspect we'll see continued movement in that directory. So a couple of things we added in this release you'll see are of special value to the cloud deployment. So on the scalability side, while we only grew from 752 to 800 ports, which isn't that much, and frankly, there's not a lot of pressure to put more ports on the system. That makes it the largest system out there in terms of in our competing market space. But we did take the user capacity up by 50%. So previously 40,000 users would support, now we support 60,000 easily. And we took the unified messaging and personal assistant users up so they match the total users. So that was a 300% increase. So now you can have 60,000 users on a CXE system, and they can all be full featured with everything that we have. And while we only increased the ports to 800, we also increased the ability to have speech resources, speech recognition on all 800 of those ports for a 60% increase. And then one of the biggest things we did, and this is one of the reasons why CX9 took a little longer than we thought, was we changed the architecture for a number of reasons. And one of the things that gave us was the ability now to have up to 5 million messages on a single CXE platform. And that's a 500% increase. So we are now pretty comfortable that there isn't much out there in the way of an enterprise deployment that we aren't going to be able to handle with this system. The tenancy piece was one of the reasons it took a while, because we had to change some architectural components. And we now have a license you can add to a CXE system that will let you have up to 100 separate tenants. Now, we could tenant the system before with some features. It wasn't a complete tenanting, but you could host multiple users on it, multiple companies. But there were some limits, and particularly in the area of security, it wasn't really what people were looking for. So we have now added a version of tenanting to the system that is a complete silo. There is no interaction between tenants. Administrators are locked to one tenant, users are locked to one tenant, ports are locked to one tenant. It might as well be completely different CXE systems. So if you add the CXE system tenanting license, you can now take that single tenant system and add as many tenants up to 100 as you want. We don't charge per tenant, it's a single system license. So we're now ready in some of the hosted environments where they want to have a service bureau type, or even some of the building services locations where having multiple tenants that are really secure. And that means, when I go into a directory to send a message, I'll only hear the users in my tenant. I can't inadvertently send a message out to somebody else. So we're very, very happy with this multi-tenancy piece, and we're interested in seeing what people do with it. On the security side, we added sort of the last piece in the chain that we needed. We now offer message store encryption, so encryption at rest. When we record a message and we put it on the drive on the CXE, it will now be encrypted. And that means even if you were to physically take possession of the box, you couldn't get to those messages and get any intelligence out of them. We're using Microsoft Windows encrypting file system, and that makes it very easy for us to encrypt on the fly as they go in and out, they come off of the drive. And the messages are not only encrypted when they're stored in terms of on the system server, but messages are actually taken on a call server and held there temporarily until they're moved to the system server. They're encrypted on the call servers as well. So full encryption. And what that gives us now is the full security chain. So encrypted at rest, encrypted on the wire, whether they're going to our clients, or even the phone connections in and out of CX can be encrypted with SIP and RTP, secure SIP. And the message, of course, anything going out messaging is secure SMTP. And then our clients are highly secure. We don't store anything on our clients. If you listen to a message on the mobile client or the web client, we download it, play it, and then it's gone. There's no copy left on the device at all. And we've taken an extra effort with private voice messages for people who are storing them in email. We now have a way of handling private voice messages where they can't be forwarded out of the system. The way we handle a private message, and if it's stored in Exchange, is we send the user a message saying, hey, you have a private message, but we don't deliver the message content to them. If we did, they could get it out of the system. There's no way to control it. So instead, they get a notification and a link, and they can go get to the message from one of our private clients, or of course, over the telephone. As we've looked at this movement into the cloud, it's been a lot of interesting things that have happened, and it's interesting, probably more interesting right now than it's been in a lot of years in terms of trying to understand what the major players are doing. Office 365 had quite a start. They were very successful. People were already using that technology in terms of on-site with Office and Exchange on-site, and the ability to move that to a cloud on a hosted environment proved very appealing to enterprise customers, and lots of customers did that. But about half of those customers weren't interested in getting their entire infrastructure hosted. In other words, their telephony infrastructure, they wanted to maintain control of on their site. So we ended up with a lot of people using Microsoft Exchange Online with the PBX in their enterprise and connected through gateways into the Microsoft environment. And Microsoft evidently decided they didn't really like that. So what they did was last July, they sent out an announcement saying, we'll no longer support that. You have some options that you can get rid of your PBX now and go with the Microsoft Cloud PBX, which they're discontinuing, or the Microsoft Teams, which isn't ready, or you can get rid of your PBX and on site put Skype for Enterprise. A lot of people aren't really happy with any of those options. So what we've done is we've made it so that we can be the solution there, where on site you can actually put our CXE system and we can still deliver those messages up into Microsoft Exchange, Office 365 online. And to make that easy, we actually did some work with Microsoft so that we can allow the users to continue to use the same Outlook form that they were already using to handle their messages. So with a voicemail in Exchange, you get a custom form, so it has a different look. It has a player bar and all those things in it. And Microsoft has a form that you would be using if you're using Exchange Online today. And if you move to CXE, we can change the way we put that message in such that you can still use that form. It really will minimize the disruption of the business as they move to it. It's not a 100% match, but it really will make it easier for people to do. In any release, we have to keep current on not only the platform we run on, but all the things we connect to, and that's a good deal of work, considering how many things we touch in the unified communications world. So as of 9.0, we now support CXE running on Windows Server 2016, including running Hyper-V on 2016 with us running on that. So we're pretty much up to date in the most secure operating environments that are out there. And everything we do, every different way you could deploy CXE is supported in the 2016 server environment. We went back to our Gmail integration. It's an interesting, Gmail, the toolkit they gave us originally to do unified messaging wasn't really as full-featured as some of the other ones we've had access to. So there were some things we couldn't do, and one of the things we couldn't do was control message waiting lights based on voice messages stored on Gmail. We could put the messages up there, and people could listen to them and play them in their client and delete them, and all that worked, but we really couldn't. The only way with the earlier version of Gmail to control message waiting lights involved polling every mailbox continually, and it was an incredible strain, both on the data link going up there and on any system that tried to do that. But they changed some of their toolkit pieces, and we were able to find a much better technology to do that. So without polling, we now can control message waiting lights for users who are storing their voice messages up in the cloud in Gmail. Notifyxpress, for those of you that don't know, is one of our most popular applications. It's an outgoing call campaign notification. So, we usually talked about it in terms of a medical clinic, calling up all their patients that had appointments the next day just to verify those. Very easy install, very low cost to deploy, and very easy for an administrator to run. One of the continuous requests was to also add SMS text capabilities to that. Depending on who those people are you're reaching, a phone number isn't always the best way to do it. So with 9.0, we've added SMS text support for Notifyxpress. You now can have a campaign set up that uses phone calls still, or text messages, or does both in a mixed campaign. We're only doing outgoing text message right now. There's no reply capabilities or anything, but this is a big add for us based on what our customers have been asking for. Another thing asked by our customers was call recording in our TeamQ. TeamQ is our informal call center workgroup management product, and while it looks quite a bit like a traditional ACD system, it's a little bit different. But one of the things that we have in common with an ACD system was customers did want to record calls. So in 9.0, we did an architecture change that allows us to have the administrator set up call recording. Now, the administrator can set that up so it records all calls into a queue, all calls into all queues, only specific queues, only specific agents, only specific teams, very, very flexible. And there's three kinds of recording. There's regular recording where we're just going to record everything and we save it, and there's a client for the administrators to maintain those messages. There's on-demand recording. We can enable an agent that at any time during a call, they can hit a button on our client and it will start the recording process. And then there's another type where we record all the calls, but if the agent doesn't request that we save that call, they get deleted that evening in maintenance. The idea there is if you're in a call and you don't think you really need to record it, but all of a sudden right in the middle of that call, you realize you need that whole call, you can click the save button and that entire call, since it has been recorded, will be saved. So that provisional recording is one of the most popular ones, I think, for call centers. So we also will be talking in the next few weeks about a partnership arrangement we have with Envision. Envision makes a number of products that have to do with call center support, and one of them, eCoach, is actually a call recording and screen recording application where you can not only record the calls, but you can see the agent's actions and save that all up, and supervisors can use that for evaluations and for training. So you'll see a partnership with them announced shortly where they will provide the call recording along with all of their other functionality and be connected to a TeamQ system. The architecture change we made here involved combining ports. What we need to do to record a call, obviously, is stay connected to that call. And in early versions of TeamQ, when the agent transferred the call to themselves, we dropped off to free up ports. And that option's still available. But we have another available option. And if you set up the user for recording, this is how it'll be set up. And what happens is when a call comes in, instead of transferring that call through the PBX, we bridge that call through CXE. And we're now on that call, and that's what allows us to do the recording. Another benefit there is that when the agent hangs up or the far end party hangs up, we now know that, and we'll disconnect the call and start to seal the record and start the process of freeing the agent up. Prior, when we were using just transfers, the agent would have had to hit the hang up button. You can see the hang up button there grayed out on the screen, because since we know this is a supervised call, the agent won't have to hang up. So that's an improvement that people have been asking for in TeamQ from the very start. Some of you probably know we use NeverFail as our high availability synchronization software. They've worked with us and written some very specific software. That's how we can have multiple system servers with automatic failover, geo-redundancy, all of those options. And they did a major upgrade to their product as well with 8.1 and 9.0. We've brought everything up to speed so we can use that new. And it gives us more options in terms of how we can be deployed, and it just makes it much, much easier to deploy the system. We've been adding private messaging enhancements for a while. These are messages that the caller, the inside user or the outside caller, marks as private. Originally, we simply marked them as private, and then if you put them in the email system didn't really mark them as private, and so the effect was lost. So we started early on implementing it such that if they mark a message as private, we would send them that email saying you have a private message, and then they could get in and get it over the phone. What we've done in 9.0 is sort of catch all the other pieces around that. If a message is marked as private, now the various telephone user interfaces will tell the user when they play that this is a private message. A user can now mark a message as private through the speech user interface, whereas before it only worked through the telephony user interface. And now we can set up whether or not private messages get forwarded by users and whether they go out to email and SMS. So kind of that tightening up of the security piece that we've been doing for the past several years. One of the other popular features of unified messaging, of course, is voicemail transcription. And while we have a product and have had a product for a while, we've used Mutari to do that, and we continue to do that. We've added another tool. This one's a little bit different in how they approach it, and I think some people will find it a little easier to use. The licensing is one of the differences. With this implementation, you pay a one-time setup fee, and then an annual subscription per user. There's no accounting and tracking of minutes, which was a little complex for some customers. So this is a different way to do it. The voice base is US English only today, and it is a cloud-based service. If you feel for security reasons that you need your voicemail transcription to be done on site, we do still offer the Mutari version. The way this works, if you haven't used this before, is you have a user, once they're licensed, when someone leaves them a voicemail on CXE, we send that out to the cloud to Mutari, to VoiceBase, and VoiceBase has an engine which converts it. The VoiceBase engine is very, very accurate, very powerful. It does context sensing. You know, if there's like 3 different kinds of buy, like, you know, buy the, you know, saying goodbye, buy as in adjacent, and buy as in purchase, from context, it actually understands how to transcribe that correctly. So it really does a fantastic job in terms of accuracy. And then, of course, VoiceBase sends you that email with the transcription along with the message as an attachment. So for those of you interested in that technology, you should contact your dealer or contact us directly, and we can arrange to show you how that works. There's a lot of other features in every release, and we don't really spend a lot of time going over all of them. I'm just going to list some of these here real quick so you know they're there. And if any are of interest, we're happy to have an offline conversation to go into more detail. We have a new web client. Our existing web client, Web Phone Manager, is still in place, very full-featured, does a great job. But from a technology point of view, we felt that it needed a refresh. So we've started that refresh, and we've actually delivered a trial client that can be installed on your system. It's full HTML only, which means it works on any kind of browser, and it is responsive, meaning it scales depending on the size format of your screen. Today, it only does messaging and some of the mailbox settings, but it's worth playing with to get a feature, kind of a feature comparison between that and the Web Phone Manager client. For our speech recognition engine, we now also support German ASR, or speech recognition. We added reply to all into the CXE original telephone user interfaces. It's been in the Intuity interface for a while, but we've added it into the native CXE ones as well. We now have an announcement when you're using auto logon that will speak the mailbox name that you're logging into. And this is because people go to somebody else's desk, call into the voicemail, and they hear enter your security code, and they don't realize that the telephone they're calling from has identified a different mailbox. So this will tell you which one you're logging into and give you instructions how to log into a different one. There's also a security code prompt that we can change in terms of how we ask for the security code. And there's also the operator prompting. When somebody goes into your mailbox, listens to your greeting, what it says is, if you don't do anything about it, what it says is, leave a message or press 0 to transfer to the operator. That's not always valid, so on a system-wide basis, we can now turn that off. Speech calls now honor the directory. When somebody had their name was not in the directory, so they didn't want to be reached through the automated attendant, if somebody used the speech interface, it wasn't directory aware, and now it is. So that's just kind of tightening up a feature that we already had. And then there's a change in the Intuity Audix TUI, if that's the one you use, to make it more similar to the actual Intuity TUI itself. Now what we're going to do is take a short survey here to gather some information that we think how we're going to use it, we think you're going to find very helpful. Anne, would you like to step in?
Yeah. So you should see the poll on your screen, and we're just looking to know if you'd be interested in participating in some calls with us, with our product management team and usability team. This would be in the future, just to get your feedback on certain features and that kind of thing. So we'll give it a few seconds here where we're capturing your yes, no. And if you select yes, then you would receive email from us periodically, not too often. And then, of course, there's no, you're not committing to anything. This is just if you're interested in hearing more about that and possibly participating. So I'll go ahead and close it, and we don't need to publish the results. I'll just let Neil go ahead and keep going. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone, for participating. So while we don't really take features out of CXE, our own features, some features have to go away based on the products they connect to. So we have to deprecate certain things, and we like to give people plenty of warning. So here's our warning. CXE 9 will be the last version that supports Microsoft Exchange 2007 and Office 2007 integration. Now, those products are very long in the tooth, and not a lot of people have them. But be aware, if you do, you need to make plans. You still can go to 9, that's fine, but the next upgrade will no longer be compatible with those. And that's also true for IBM Notes 8.0. And since we're announcing some in advance, I guess it's only fair that we tell you about the ones in this release as well. So there are some discontinued features. It's really not features so much as integration types. But what's going to happen when you move to 9 is you can no longer use the Mitel, MyVoice, MyTie integration. That integration has to be replaced. They have a SIP integration that you can replace it with. And to ease that transition, we're actually giving the SIP integration away. You just have to buy the resources for the RTP stream, which is a very small chart. So just be aware, if you're at 8.7 using the MyTie integration and you're going to go to 9, you are going to have to arrange to do that. We've also discontinued public use of a number of our migration utilities. And the reason for this is we changed the architecture of the message store in CX9. We had to do that to get to that 5 million messages and to get to tenanting. We need to have messages in different directories and places based on tenants. So as a result, the core tools that we've given to the channel over the years actually don't work anymore. We have some special multi-process, multi-step ways of doing this, so we still can do the migrations, but they have to be done by our professional services people. And that's it for CX9. I'm assuming there might be some questions.
There are a couple of questions. So the first one is actually, you know what? In case you'd like to submit a question and you haven't already done that, you may have it minimized. Use the orange arrow in the upper corner, and then you should see the question box toward the bottom. First question, Neil, how does MWI work through Gmail?
So rather than having to pull the mailboxes, there's a functionality where you register a specific app, and that app gets notified. So I register the 1,000 users that have unified messaging, and every time there's a change in that mailbox, the Gmail engine itself notifies that one location. So we can simply go to that one location and get a list of all the changes. Whereas prior, and what some of our competition does, is they have to open up every single mailbox and look at the messages to see if there's still new voice messages there. So if you'd like, offline, we can have a conversation that goes into a little more detail about the names of the pieces of the things that we're using. But we did this at the same time we were increasing mailbox capacity on unified messaging from 20,000 to 60,000, and we were actually able to test it. There's virtually no impact even at 60,000 users.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Question, what about all the developments made with UC Connect or API? Batch files supported in CX 8.7. Does CX9 still support all of these?
So the general answer is yes. UC Connect is still supported. I will issue one caveat, and that is right now, if you enable tenanting, UC Connect won't work. We're fixing that. We didn't want to hold the whole release because of that. And it just has to do with UC Connect has to learn how to look in some different places. But if you have an app written in UC Connect, most applications will work flawlessly because all the different ways you'd be reaching into the system and touching things are the same. If you're doing specific things with messaging and moving messages around, you might want to get in touch with us because the message directory structure changed, as I said, to get that 5 million messages in those tenants, we now have partitioned directories. And if you're using the SOAP API calls or the UC Connect calls that say post a message or get a message, that's fine because that's going through our SOAP engine and it knows how to do it. But if you're actually doing any file level manipulation on those messages, then you might want to check with us because those messages are in a slightly different place now. Other than that, you should be fine with any of your custom applications.
Okay, there's a couple of questions about tenanting. The first one, can you give an example of a customer scenario where tenanting is preferred?
Yeah, and it's interesting because sometimes when people ask for tenanting, that's not really what they're looking at. But let's say we have a business services company. I have a 25-story building downtown, and I'm renting out office space. So I'm going to have 40 different tenants, 40 different customers in there, and I'm providing services, including the phone system, the voicemail, whatever. Now, if I have callers coming in and leaving me messages, and I'm listening to those messages, and I'm going to forward message to another user on my system, if I'm not really paying attention, I really don't want to accidentally forward that message to a different tenant, 5 floors up, who might be my competitor. So I, as a user, want my functionality to be locked down solid. I don't want to hear other users' names in the directory except for those in my tenant. I don't want to inadvertently send messages out. I don't want an administrator who's looking at a different tenant to be able to go in and change my mailboxes. I really want a partition between those tenants that's complete. And that's what we do. And then, of course, the big example would be a hosted service provider. I'm going to put a CXE up online, and I'm going to host users remotely. And in order to do that, I really need admin to be partitioned, the message store to be partitioned, everything for both security and access. And that's what we've done with our tenanting.
Okay, next, how are the ports distributed when using the multi-tenant feature?
So the ports will be specific to a tenant. So when I create Now that doesn't mean a phone system is limited to a single tenant. Let's say I have that multi-tenanting person, and I have a large NEC switch, as my building hosted switch. I will bring in 8 ports for tenant 1. They'll be programmed as tenant 1. Everything about them will be visible only to the administrator of tenant 1, and those calls can only be pointed to subscriber mailboxes and menu mailboxes for 1. So ports do have to be tenanted for our, just like the tenants itself, they have to be partitioned.
Okay, and speaking of ports, here's a question about TeamQ. Does the new recording feature use the 2 channels per recorded call?
Yes, if you're going to have recording enabled, that means we're going to use 2 CXE channels for the entire duration of the call. And that will increase the number of ports you use. Now, keep in mind, this is an option. You don't have to enable it. You don't have to enable it for all users. You don't have to enable it for all teams. But when you do set somebody up for recording, the only way we can do that is by keeping CX connected to that call. And the only way to do that is to have it bridged between 2 different ports.
Okay. Are there any licensing changes with CXE 9?
Gosh, I don't think so. There's the increased license count, obviously, for unified messaging and personal assistant. There's a single new license for the tenanting feature, and I don't believe there's anything else that changes.
Okay. If we have virtualized all our servers and use VMware and vMotion, how does Never Fail benefit us? Is it more of a benefit in CXE 9?
So this is a question where, we probably, if you really want an in-depth answer, we'd have to take this offline. But let me give you a couple of areas. Let's say I put something on VMware. VMware has failover. When that server fails, it can have a shadow copy of this, let's say the system server running that is running in parallel, and it will take over. So it'll switch over automatically. And that's a nice healthy failover. But all that VMware knows is that the other server failed. It doesn't really know what applications are running on it. With Never Fail, we actually have a heartbeat that's telling us what's going on that system. So we can detect failures before. It doesn't require a complete crash of the system. We can say, oh, look, memory usage is way too high. We better switch over to this one and let somebody know to come take a look at it. So that's one of the features, is it's a more thorough mating between the 2 systems. Secondly, what VMware does is copies everything over to that other system. So if you were to, let's say, get a virus on the first system, it's going to be copied over to the second system. If your first system crashes because it has a virus, the second system boots up and takes over, it's got the virus as well. So it gives you a little better security through that. And we actually have a little presentation that if somebody wants to get in touch with us, that we can run through and kind of go through in detail how that works. And this almost seems to be a religious discussion as opposed to a technical one in terms of how people think this should be done. And you can just use VMware or Hyper-V and get redundancy. You can just use Never Fail on bare hardware servers. You can put Never Fail inside VMware or Hyper-V and get kind of the combination of the best of both. It's just a matter of how much protection you really want.
Okay, is the call recording feature licensed separately?
No, we're pretty happy we're going to get enough money for the extra ports. So we don't license it. It's just, as far as we're concerned, it's a feature that's available for TeamQ if you want it.
Okay, so you do have to have the TeamQ license, obviously, and the UC Connect that comes with, or that is part of that package. Part of it made it order both. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, does the recording work with SIP and or H323?
Well, we don't do H323. We only do SIP integrations. But yes, it works with any of. One of the great things about how we've built all our applications, and this isn't really visible to people, I don't think, if you're not kind of deep in the guts of how this all works. What we have is an application server that runs everything that we do. That means TeamQ is running on the same physical server or software server as is messaging, as is anything else that we have. And what that lets us do is deliver these solutions for less money in terms of, you don't have to buy a separate server to do all these things. So whatever we connect to, and we support, I don't even know what the latest number of integrations we support. I don't know of anything that's an active phone system we don't connect to. But whatever we connect to, then TeamQ is going to work fine regardless.
Okay. Just doing a quick scroll. It looks like we got through most of the questions, if not all. There was one about the recording. So if you joined a couple of minutes after we got started with the webinar, we will send, I mentioned this, but we will send you a link later today to the recording, as well as a link to these slides. And in addition, we always route the questions around internally to our sales and/or sales engineering, so that just to make sure that we did answer appropriately. And as Neil mentioned on a couple, maybe offline conversations with more detail are in order. So so with that, we'll go ahead and wrap this one up. Just want to thank everyone for taking the time to join us today. And as always, if you have questions, you can also submit those to us at any time to info@avst.com, and we'll make sure that that gets to the right person. So if there's any follow-on questions. And Neil, thanks again for the presentation. Have a great day, everyone.
To learn more about AVST, please visit www.avst.com.